Yesterday we spoke about the United States. And the cutting of the aid to Egypt. And if you didn't watch that video, well, of course, you can go ahead and watch it later on. But in short, the United States told the Egyptians officially that that's it, we're going to be cutting the aid from next year, from 2026. Now, that aid is tied with the peace treaty of the Egyptian side with Israel. According to that peace treaty that they have, the Camp David Accords, the United States gives them aid. So if the United States decides to cut the aid, that means it's nullifying the peace treaty. Of course, regardless of the fact that, well, that peace treaty is nothing but ink on paper now because of what Egypt is doing in, Sinai. And before that, the Israeli breach, by the way, I mean, the Camp David Accords, they were established upon, eventually at one point having a Palestinian state, which never happened. So, Egypt always had that argument. Well, the Camp David Accords say that we need to have a Palestinian state. We're not just having a peace treaty with you without the Palestinian. And then Israel doesn't have anything. Egypt could use that at any point. But now, of course, we know what the situation is like in the Sinai Peninsula. And that's problematic for Israel. However, there was this report here following that actual report yesterday that the United States is pulling off or cutting off the aid from Egypt. And of course, this is an Israeli newspaper here, Ma'ariv, and they're also quoting Al Arab Al Jadid as well with their report. I chose this because it has a couple of other bits of information that I wanted to share with you that are essential to understand exactly what's happening. So, according to this report, there's a confirmation that the United States administration, they actually decided to change their official policy in relation to the military aid that they give to Egypt. And then diplomatic sources from Egypt actually revealed to Al Arab Al Jadid saying that, Cairo actually officially received the information from the United States about cutting the aid, and this is due to start taking place next year. However, and of course, Donald Trump, he previously threatened, in case you don't know, to cut the aid of Jordan and Egypt in case they don't accept his plan to ethnically cleanse Gaza. But now, of course, he did a 180, which Egypt is happy with. Egypt said, we welcome the change that's coming from Donald Trump. They didn't even question. They didn't take time to capitalize on that statement that was made by Donald Trump, regardless of what he meant by it and regardless of the actual situation, circumstances. Because it was just like a blunt response, going and stepping in when the question was being addressed to the Irish Prime Minister when he was meeting with him. But what this report also said, by the way, which was very interesting, is that Egypt actually hasn't had an official visit to the United States to even try and change the United States position. So the Egyptians, they're not like going to the US to beg, oh no, please continue to keep the aid as it is, right? The report here says it's actually 2.1 billion that they get, 1.3 billion of which goes to military aid. And diplomatic sources are saying Egypt is not going to the United States to even discuss or ask the United States to review. From their perspective, if you don't want to send that money, don't send the money. Have this unilateral move, well, at least to this moment. And then we will have our own moves. Maybe they will be more liberated, right? Previously, Egypt restricted itself, especially when they wanted to purchase certain things from Russia, for example. The US threatened them with sanctions because, can't bypass us. We have sanctions against Russia. You can't, buy their Su-35s, for example. Then they went to France instead, and now they got the Chinese fighter jets that gave them what they wanted, which are air-to-air capabilities that would be an equation changer with Israel, because the United States they never wanted to equip Egypt, even for the F-16s, with air-to-air capabilities, so that they keep the Israeli superiority. And the Egyptians started to get sick of that. But unless, of course, Egypt then, or we have information that then later says, well, Egypt will go at some point to the United States to try and lobby and tell them, look, change your views. We still want that aid. And do you need any assurance? They're not doing that so far. According to this report, no, they're not asking for anything. Until they do that, we understand that the Egyptian position is even getting stronger than before. We have China, we have Russia, we have BRICS, we have other countries too. And more backing now, especially even from EU backing now with their proposal for Gaza that went against the US administration proposal. That was in line with the Israeli proposal. And the final important bit that they mentioned in this report is the worry that's coming from Israel of the level of arms and preparation for war from the Egyptian side. And Yechiel Leiter, who is the Israeli ambassador to the US, has accused Egypt, they're reminding everyone, of a massive, severe breaches of the actual peace treaty between Egypt and Israel after 45 years. And according to him, Egypt built bases, military bases in Sinai that can only be used for offensive measures, for offensive attacks, offensive weapons, attack weapons. This is a blunt and clear violation. He's saying what they're doing in Sinai is not defensive, and they cannot even try and convince us that it's defensive. Which means, of course, well, Egypt so far, they're looking like they're taking a step back from all of this position with the United States. It's as if, they will be liberated. If the United States actually stops this aid, and maybe they have more excuses to do more stuff in Sinai, or even have more deals with other countries too. And of course, Israel is exceptionally worried, which leads us to the United Nations, the United Nations Human Rights Council. They had, of course, severe statements against the state of Israel, and we're going to talk about them. We're going to talk about why they are not being mentioned in the mainstream media, and what was the Israeli response. So they published this: more than a human can bear. Israel's systematic use of sexual, reproductive, and other forms of gender-based violence since October 2023. They're saying that the gender-based violence against the Palestinians is part of a broader effort against their right to self-determination. And they're saying that Israel deliberately destroyed sexual reproductive healthcare facilities, according to a new report that they had today. Broad range of violations perpetrated against Palestinian women, men, girls, and boys across the occupied Palestinian territory since October the 7th, 2023, constituting a major element to the ill treatment of the Palestinians and the unlawful occupation and persecution of the Palestinians as a group. The chair of the commission said there is no escape from the conclusion that Israel has employed sexual and gender-based violence against the Palestinians to terrorize them and perpetuate a system of oppression that undermines their right to self-determination. And it didn't just, of course, end there. They spoke a lot about other things too. Their genocidal acts, intentionally attacking and destroying healthcare facilities, targeting the people to a level that can be considered a genocide. And again, you didn't hardly saw anything of that, by the way, on mainstream media. Again, damning indictment. I mean, of course, we knew that, but thankfully now more and more are saying a genocide. I mean, some people, some online figures and journalists and what have you, and presenters were questioning, what's the definition of a genocide? It's as if they've never read the English dictionary. Oh no, genocide, no. ICJ came and said genocide. Oh no, still we don't believe that. Legal law, legal terminology, health, nothing works for them. And now we have this, and what they do, of course, to deny all of that, they just won't publish it. It's simple, we won't say anything, as if nothing happens. But of course, Israel responded. Israel responded to these accusations. What did they respond with? Well, there were two responses. One of them was from, the official state of Israel, and the other one was from Benjamin Netanyahu. The official state of Israel said, here we go, blood libel, a sick document that only an anti-Semitic organization could produce. Well, of course, if they weren't going to be anti-Semitic, then who will be anti-Semitic? This is one of the worst cases of blood libel the world has ever seen. And the world has seen many. It blames the victims and crimes committed against them. Hamas is the organization that committed horrific sexual crimes against Israelis. No proof. This is indeed a sick document that only an anti-Semitic organization as the United Nations could have produced. Of course. Well, of course, everyone is anti-Semitic. Everything is anti-Semitic if it criticizes Israel. Every single thing on earth that criticizes Israel is anti-Semitic, including the UN, everything. But also, Benjamin Netanyahu had a response too. Benjamin Netanyahu was same level of fierceness. He said, anti-Israeli circus, anti-Semitic body and supporter of terror. The anti-Israeli circus called the UN's Human Rights Council has long been exposed as an anti-Semitic, rotten, terrorist-supporting and irrelevant body. Woo. It was not for nothing that Israel decided to withdraw from it about a month ago. This is not the Human Rights Council, this is the Blood Rights Council. The UN chooses once again to attack the state of Israel with false accusations, including unfounded accusations of sexual violence. Oh no, we didn't see anything about sexual violence apart from your own rapist going on live television, bragging about it, and getting a blessing from your religious figures and the crowd and politicians and journalists. We haven't seen, apart from that, we hardly saw anything. And no statements, of course, from the Palestinian women who were released from the dungeons of this terror entity. But Netanyahu is saying there's no evidence whatsoever. All right. Moving on to Putin and Ukraine. What are the developments exactly? Okay, so the United States, whatever we think about the administration and Trump, they're clearly working towards de-escalation. The way we like it, the way we don't like it. Well, it's happening. It's happening. There are talks now. And they're not taking an opposing position to a peaceful process. As a matter of fact, the moves that they're conducting are pushing there, but the Russians still have they still have their own position. What did they propose exactly, and what did the Russians respond? What was the Russian response? So Firstly, all of a sudden, Putin, Vladimir Putin, is actually showing himself with, a military gear, right? Here's Vladimir Putin, military gear, right? Walking around. And again, sending a message, well, why is he wearing military gear? But he also had a response. So the United States, they actually had a proposal to the Russians. Let's have a 30-day ceasefire. And then we will look into all of the other details. Steve Witkoff in particular, he had a closed door meeting at the Kremlin on Thursday night. And Port saying he's being careful, to say he broadly supports the initiative, Putin himself, but he's putting some conditions. Well, what did Putin say exactly? He said, we agree with the proposal to stop military actions, but we proceed from the fact that this cessation could be such that it would lead to a long-term peace and eliminate the root causes of the crisis. Now, the roots of the crisis, problems that Russia has to address, confirming that the territories that it controls is theirs, no further argument about them. They don't want this period to be a period where the Ukrainians rearm and all of a sudden they start having more offensives. They want a confirmation, a very clear confirmation of what's happening in Kursk. They're saying over 67,000 Ukrainians died there, and Putin is saying several thousand left. They will either die or be imprisoned, and they better go out. And also another point that came out from Putin is, how will they be used? Of course, he's worried about mobilization, supplying more weapons, or what are they going to do exactly? Second thing as well, he's worried about who's going to actually monitor this ceasefire. They have a 2,000-kilometer border with the Ukrainians. How are we going to actually see who's going to monitor the violations exactly? Is each side going to say, oh no, they violated and I breached and we breached? What's going to happen exactly? And that's insinuating perhaps that there might be peacekeeping forces in those areas up until the initial phase of the ceasefire ends, so that there could be actually a real peace process. And there's also a big gap, and that's another problem, between the American position still and the European position. The European position, or more precisely, NATO members' position, with some others as well, but not all of them. More European countries are showing a problematic approach with the United States administration, saying that you are far away, we are here. If we're not going to help the Ukrainians now, we're going to be suffering. And if we're going to suffer, we're going to have to deal with it directly. That's why there are calls now from Macron, for example, and others as well, to try and chip in, have a European army, as they're calling it. Clearly, the United States isn't that interested in NATO as they were before, or they're really changing their approach with NATO, and that's raising alarm bells with the European side. So there needs to be consensus, because of course, the US is primarily the party that should primarily have the agreement with Russia, because they were the main backer of Zelensky. However, all of a sudden, them doing a 180 puts Europe in a very awkward position. So if they're not seeing eye to eye, then they might be taking a different position. There might be other European countries saying that, well, we can't be telling our population of people and everyone that, oh, they're hostile, they're going to occupy Europe, and if they win, then it's catastrophic. It's a catastrophical event for Europe as a whole. And then all of a sudden agree to a deal where Russia will win. Russia will be victorious. There is no denying. They will be taking territories from Ukraine for life. That's it. Ukraine officially will be defeated, as in the Ukrainian government, by the way, not necessarily the Ukrainian people. There's a difference between the Ukrainian government or the Ukrainian authorities and Zelensky and the people. Because don't forget, in the past years, there were lots of tensions between the population and the authorities, especially with the conscription in Ukraine. They were dragging people off the streets. And reports of over 1 million dead and being dragged into this pointless war that was serving nothing but the military-industrial complex, and greedy politicians who were profiteering out of this war. So the United States, they have to have some sort of an agreement with Europe too. It can't just go ahead like that because, well, you might have another European countries. They already started to, speak with Zelensky and tell him we will help where the United States is not helping and all of that. There would be an agreement. However, what we do understand is that it's on the way. There are positive signs that it's on the way to get resolved. In the meantime, though, Russia is taking an aggressive position. They are actually increasing some of the strikes too. And although Putin is showing positive signs, he put the ball back into the American court to give him the guarantees that he needs to go ahead with the ceasefire that he would eventually want to lead to a full peace process between them and Ukraine.